Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So today we are on episode 4 out of our 5-part series, which will be comparing the different militaries of the Galactic Republic, the Galactic Empire, and the First Order. We already covered these organizations' training methods, equipment, and leadership structure. So today we will be talking about their naval power. But before we continue, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss our final video, which comes out next and will determine finally which one of these militaries was the best. We'll also be putting all these videos inside a playlist so it's easier for you guys to find. In the Star Wars galaxy, naval forces were the only way you can move your attacking forces from one system to another. Without a proper fleet, even the most well-equipped ground forces can be easily destroyed with orbital bombardment. Therefore, today's video on naval power will be heavily weighted in the final consideration of which military organization is the most powerful. The Galactic Republic's naval fleet centered around the Venator-class Star Destroyer, also known as the Jedi Cruiser. The mid-sized Venator class was 1,137 meters in length and had a crew of 7,400. It carried a modest armament of 8 heavy dual turbo laser turrets, 2 medium dual turbo laser turrets, and 52 point defense cannons. Aside from being the primary capital ship in most Republic fleets, the Venator class was a capable carrier ship as well, and could hold over 400 starfighters. It was also one of the largest ships capable of atmospheric operations and was often utilized as a troop and vehicle carrier. It could also carry out fire missions to help troops on the ground. And guys, if you've ever seen weapon systems designed for ship-to-ship combat used on people, well, it's not pretty. The smaller 752-meter Acclamator class assault ship served primarily as a troop and material transport. It could carry around 16,000 clone troopers, including several ATTE walkers, gunships, and other miscellaneous vehicles and equipment. The Acclamator was relatively well armed for a troop transporter. It boasted 12 quad laser turrets, 24 laser cannons, and 4 missile launchers. Heading the Imperial Starfleet was the ridiculously large Executor-class Star Dreadnought, otherwise known as Superstar Destroyer. It was roughly the size of Manhattan at 19 kilometers long, and had a crew of over 250,000 people and more than 5,000 weapon emplacements. It was essentially a flying Imperial city with the power to destroy an entire planet's surface or take on an entire fleet. At its height, the Empire's navy had over a dozen of these massive ships. It was so massive that Emperor Palpatine had to lie about how big the ship was to the Senate's budgeting committee. That's right, the Emperor of the Empire, with all its power, still wasn't able to justify how freaking large this thing was. The backbone of the Imperial fleet was made of 25,000 Imperial-class Star Destroyers. These iconic warships were easily one of the most recognizable symbols of the Empire. When one appeared above your planet, it meant either salvation from chaos and crime, or subjugation through death and destruction. The 1,600-meter Imperial class was armed with an impressive 60 turbo laser batteries and 60 ion cannons. It had a crew of 37,000 and could carry 10,000 Stormtroopers along with 72 TIE fighters. The Imperial class was updated to a Mark II version which incorporated heavier shields, more armor, and weapons emplacements. The First Order was created from the remnants of the Galactic Empire. The core of this new fleet still utilized the Imperial-class Star Destroyer, but modifications were made so that unmanned repair drones could replace most of the maintenance crew. The Resurgent-class battle cruiser was the pride of the First Order Navy. The 3,000-meter ship was equipped with over 1,500 weapons emplacements, not including point defense. Learning from the design flaws of the Galactic Empire's destroyers, the Resurgent class had a much less prominent bridge, which was heavily fortified along with the secondary emergency bridge in the middle of the ship. It was crewed by 74,000 naval personnel and could carry a full legion of Stormtroopers. It could also hold 2 full wings of TIE fighters. Because of these capabilities, the Resurgent class was considered not only a capital ship but also a fighter carrier and a troop transporter. The Republic depended on a variety of starfighters in its fleet. Heading the lineup was the multi-purpose ARC-170 and Z-95 Headhunter clone variant. Both of these starfighters were heavily armed and shielded and could serve as either interceptors, escort ships, or assault craft. The headhunters were lighter and more maneuverable but lacked a hyperdrive. The ARC-170s had a crew of 3 and a sophisticated sensor package. During battle, the craft's S-foils would open up to increase cooling capabilities. It also carried proton torpedoes, allowing the ARC-170 to fill a light bomber role. The famous BTL-A4 Y-wing served as the main bomber for the Republic. Unlike the stripped-down variant used by the Rebel Alliance, the original Y-wing had a rear turret gunner. The V-19 Torrent Starfighter or V-wing filled the short-range fighter role. They were extremely agile and fast, and were lightly armed with only 2 forward lasers, but also carried concussion missiles to deal with larger threats. The Delta VII Interceptor was designed specifically for the Jedi. It was made with less internal systems than other starfighters. The engineers focused on making the ship more maneuverable and responsive to take advantage of the Jedi's force sensitivity. The ETA-2 Actis Interceptor would replace the Delta VII. It was significantly smaller and shorter, and like the Delta VII, it was too small to fit a hyperdrive and depended on hyperspace rings for long-distance travel. The ETA-2 also featured S-coils which could open in the middle of combat to cool systems down. It was more heavily armed than the Delta VII but lacked defensive shields. The Imperial Navy had a different doctrine. It focused heavily on powerful capital ships alongside carriers that would deploy overwhelming numbers of low-quality starfighters. During the Galactic Empire era, multi-purpose snub fighters like the Headhunter and ARC-170s were phased out and replaced by lightly armed interceptors, which depended on agility and speed. To save weight to achieve this maneuverability, most Imperial fighters didn't have hyperdrives or shield generators. This also reflected what the Imperial Navy saw their fighter pilots as: cannon fodder. The TIE In-Space Superiority Starfighter was the most widely used ship in the Imperial fleet. In many ways, it was similar in purpose to the Japanese Imperial Air Force's Mitsubishi Zero. It was cheap to manufacture, could outmaneuver any fighter that went up against it, and was built with the structural integrity of a plywood coffin. And its pilots were encouraged to be suicidal and were instructed to ignore their own well-being in order to achieve their goals. Its recognizable screaming engine noise put fear into the hearts of its enemies, but in reality was just the lack of shielding and noise reduction material placed around the engine. In order to further limit costs and discourage desertion, the TIE Fighter was also not equipped with a hyperdrive. Its cockpit was extremely uncomfortable and cramped, and pilots always wore their full flight gear because of the lack of shielding and minimal life support system on board. The TIE Fighter's lone safety mechanism was an ejector seat, although how useful that is in space has yet to be determined. Also, it was extremely dangerous to trigger because the rocket-powered ejector seat was located right on top of the fuel tanks. On a positive note, the TIE Fighters were powered by green renewable energy. It had 12 solar collectors arranged on both wings of the fighter. See, the Empire isn't all that bad. Many other variants of the TIE Fighter were designed, including the even faster and heavily armed TIE Interceptor. There was also the TIE Striker, which was specialized for atmospheric flight and also had ground strike capabilities. Then there was the twin-hulled, heavily armed TIE Bomber, which was called the Sitting Duck by Rebel pilots because of its slow speed and lack of shielding. Most advanced versions of the TIE Fighter appeared towards the end of the Galactic Civil War because Imperial starfighters were being heavily outperformed by Rebel snub fighters. There was the TIE Advanced version 1, which was famously piloted by Darth Vader during the Battle of Yavin, and the Tri-Wing TIE Defender favored by Admiral Thrawn because it had deflector shields and increased firepower. The First Order saw fighter pilots as a crucial part of their navy, therefore their TIE Fighters were much better designed. The main starfighter for the First Order was the TIE Space Superiority Fighter. It was very similar to the original Imperial design, but included many upgrades to meet modern fighter standards. This included an improved power system, which allowed for an onboard deflector shield. There was even a more advanced Special Forces version of the TIE Fighter. Identified by a red stripe, this two-seater fighter model was equipped with the laser turret to improve defensive capability. Although with the TIE Fighter's gigantic wings, it's questionable how effective this turret actually was. The Special Forces TIE Fighter also was equipped with a missile launcher and had deflector shields and a hyperdrive. The Galactic Republic's military doctrine focused on superior ground forces that were used to liberate worlds from the control of the Separatist Alliance. Therefore, their ships were designed to support their ground troops. Their main capital ships were laughable in size and firepower compared to the First Order and the Empire. But each one of their Star Destroyers carried an impressive contingent of over 400 starfighters, which is almost 6 times more than an Imperial class destroyer. These fighters were also much better designed than the Imperial TIE fighters and could easily take out a capital ship. The Galactic Empire's military doctrine heavily relied on space superiority in order to keep control of its huge territory. Following the Tarkin doctrine, the Empire needed only one Star Destroyer in orbit to maintain control of an entire planet. The Death Star 1 and 2 further expanded on this ideology, but proved to be a poor use of resources as they made easy targets for the Rebel Alliance. The Rebels showed that they could do tons of damage to the Empire with well-equipped snub fighters and almost no capital ships, which showed that the Imperial Navy had one great weakness, which was its inability to defend against starfighters. The First Order's military doctrine depended on highly trained, well-equipped forces, and its navy reflected this as well. Starkiller Base was perhaps the most powerful superweapon ever created. It could destroy entire planetary systems. Unlike the Death Star, it was built around a planet and not from scratch, which saved building costs and time. The First Order was forced to be smarter and more efficient because of their lack of resources. But like the Death Star, Starkiller Base served as too tempting of a target and was ultimately destroyed. At this time, it's unknown how big the First Order fleet really is, and only one known Resurgent-class battle cruiser, the Finalizer, has been identified. However, Republic intelligence has hinted that the First Order has a Dreadnought-class vessel even bigger than the Resurgent. Either way, the First Order's navy is most likely smaller than the Galactic Republic's and much smaller than the Empire's, but its technologically advanced ships definitely gives it a tactical advantage. Okay guys, so that's our comparison of these 3 naval powers. Let us know what you think. Is the Republic's lightly armed capital ships combined with its large fleet of starfighters powerful enough to take on the Empire? Or is the elite strike force of the First Order mobile enough to do massive damage to the 2 larger organizations' military infrastructure? Anyway guys, let us know in the comment section below what you guys think, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification button because you're not going to want to miss the 5th and final video of this series where we tally up all the results and finally determine which one of these military organizations is the most powerful. And as usual, thanks for joining us guys, and if you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.